Every day, hundreds of millions of people around the world eat them. They appear on restaurant menus, in grocery stores, in home kitchens, and on street food stalls on every continent where the sea meets human civilization. They are among the most commercially important seafood species on Earth, generating tens of billions of dollars in annual trade and supporting the livelihoods of millions of fishers and farmers across Asia, the Americas, Africa, and beyond. And yet the overwhelming majority of people who eat them cannot tell them apart, not just visually, but biologically, culinarily, and commercially. Prawns and shrimp, two words used interchangeably in everyday language, on restaurant menus, in supermarkets, and in cookbooks across the English-speaking world. In Australia and the United Kingdom, virtually everything sold as shrimp in America is called prawn. In the United States, virtually everything sold as prawn in Britain is called shrimp. This terminology problem runs so deep that marine biologists, seafood industry professionals, and culinary experts have spent decades trying, with limited success, to establish a clear and consistent standard. But beneath the linguistic confusion lies a genuine and fascinating biological reality. Prawns and shrimp are not the same animal. They belong to different suborders within the crustacean world, differ in their anatomy, their gill structure, their claw arrangement, their reproductive biology, and their preferred habitats. And understanding these differences reveals a story about evolution, ecology, and the extraordinary diversity of life in the world's oceans and freshwater systems. Today, WildForge explores every dimension that separates prawns from shrimp, their evolutionary origins, their physical differences, their habitats, their biology, their commercial importance, and the scientific reality behind one of the most commonly asked questions in the natural world. To understand the difference between prawns and shrimp, we need to start where all biological understanding starts, with classification. And here, the picture is both clear and surprisingly complex. Both prawns and shrimp belong to the class Malacostraca, the largest class of crustaceans, which also includes crabs, lobsters, and krill. Within Malacostraca, both belong to the order Decapoda, meaning 10-footed, the group of crustaceans characterized by having 10 legs. This places both prawns and shrimp in the same broad grouping as crabs and lobsters, reflecting their shared crustacean heritage. The critical taxonomic separation occurs at the level of suborder. Shrimp belong to the suborder Pleochaemata, specifically to the infraorder Caridea, the true shrimp. Prawns belong to the suborder Dendrobranchiata, a separate and more ancient lineage within the decapod crustaceans. This suborder level separation is significant. It means that prawns and shrimp are less closely related to each other than either is to certain other crustaceans. The evolutionary divergence between Dendrobranchiata and Pleochaemata occurred hundreds of millions of years ago, deep in the Paleozoic era, making this one of the oldest splits within the decapod family tree. However, and this is where the complexity begins, the everyday use of the words prawn and shrimp in English does not follow this taxonomic boundary. In common usage, both words are applied to members of both suborders, depending entirely on the country, the region, the size of the animal, and the commercial context. Large Caridea shrimp are routinely sold as prawns in British supermarkets. Members of the Dendrobranchiata sold in American markets are almost universally labeled shrimp. This disconnect between scientific classification and everyday language is one of the primary sources of misidentification, and it means that resolving the question, what is the difference between a prawn and a shrimp, requires holding two separate answers in mind simultaneously: the biological answer and the culinary commercial answer. Despite the naming overlap, there are genuine and consistent physical differences between true prawns, Dendrobranchiata, and true shrimp, Caridea, that allow a trained eye to distinguish them reliably. The most immediately visible difference is in the body structure, particularly at the junction between the sections of the body. Both prawns and shrimp have a body divided into three main regions: the cephalothorax, the fused head and thorax, the abdomen, and the tail. In shrimp, the second abdominal segment, the middle segment of the abdomen, overlaps both the first segment in front of it and the third segment behind it, creating a distinctive double overlapping structure. In prawns, each abdominal segment overlaps only the one directly behind it, creating a simpler, more uniform overlapping pattern. This difference in segment overlap is one of the most reliable anatomical features for distinguishing true prawns from true shrimp, though it requires close examination and is not readily apparent to casual observers. The second major physical difference is in the gill structure, a difference that is actually the basis for the scientific classification of the two groups. Shrimp, Caridea, have lamellar gills, meaning the gills are plate-like in structure. Prawns, Dendrobranchiata, have branching gills, which is precisely what the name Dendrobranchiata means, branch-gilled. These branching gills give prawns a higher surface area for gas exchange, and are one of the fundamental anatomical features that distinguish the two groups at the molecular and fossil levels. The third significant physical difference is in the claw arrangement. Both prawns and shrimp have claws, pincers, on some of their legs, but the arrangement differs. In shrimp, the first two pairs of legs have claws. In prawns, the first three pairs of legs have claws. This difference in claw number is a consistent and diagnostically useful feature for biologists, though again not easily visible to the casual observer without close examination. In terms of size, true prawns, as Dendrobranchiata, tend to be larger on average than true shrimp. Caridea, though there is considerable overlap and many exceptions in both directions. The commercially important giant tiger prawn, Penaeus monodon, can reach lengths of over 30 centimeters, making it one of the largest decapod crustaceans used in aquaculture. Many commonly consumed Caridea shrimp species are considerably smaller, though large Caridea species also exist. One of the clearest and most biologically significant differences between prawns and shrimp is in their reproductive biology, a difference that has important practical consequences for the aquaculture industry. True shrimp, Scaridea, carry their eggs attached to the underside of the abdomen between the swimming legs called pleopods. A female shrimp can be identified as brooding by the visible mass of eggs attached beneath her abdomen. She carries these eggs until they hatch, actively cleaning and aerating them by fanning with her pleopods. This direct brooding behavior is called incubation, and it means the female shrimp invests considerable time and energy in protecting each batch of eggs through development. True prawns, Dendrobranchiata, do not brood their eggs. Instead, females release their eggs directly into the water column immediately after fertilization, where the eggs develop freely as part of the plankton. This release of eggs into open water is called spawning, and it means that prawn eggs and larvae are subject to the full range of predation and environmental hazards that affect open water plankton, a very different reproductive strategy from the protected brooding of shrimp. This reproductive difference has enormous practical significance for aquaculture. Because prawn larvae develop in open water and must pass through multiple free-swimming larval stages before becoming juveniles, prawn aquaculture requires specialized larval rearing facilities that can culture the appropriate microalgae and other food organisms that different larval stages require. Shrimp aquaculture, while also technically demanding, involves different challenges because the brooding biology of true shrimp means that eggs develop under maternal care. Both prawns and shrimp occupy an enormous range of aquatic habitats worldwide, but they differ in their general habitat preferences and their tolerance of freshwater versus marine environments. True shrimp, Caridea, are the more habitat flexible of the two groups. They are found in marine environments from the intertidal zone to the deep sea, in brackish estuaries and coastal lagoons, and, remarkably, in fully freshwater environments including rivers, lakes, and cave systems. The freshwater shrimp of the family Attidae, for example, are found in freshwater rivers and streams across the tropical and subtropical world. And some species have colonized completely isolated cave systems, where they have evolved in darkness for millions of years. This ability to colonize and thrive in freshwater environments is relatively rare among decapod crustaceans and reflects the physiological flexibility of the Caridea. True prawns, Dendrobranchiata, are predominantly marine animals. While some species are found in estuaries and tolerate reduced salinity, the Dendrobranchiata as a group are far less successful in colonizing freshwater environments than the Caridea. The commercially important Penaeid prawns, the group that includes the giant tiger prawn and the Pacific white shrimp, are fundamentally marine or estuarine animals that require salt water for reproduction even when they can tolerate reduced salinity for feeding and growth. This habitat difference has practical implications for the global seafood industry. The dominance of Penaeid prawns in tropical marine and estuarine aquaculture reflects their large size, rapid growth rate, and tolerance of the high-density pond conditions used in commercial farming. The dominance of Caridea in temperate and cold water marine fisheries reflects their abundance in those environments. Prawns and shrimp together constitute one of the most commercially valuable seafood categories on Earth, and understanding the commercial landscape requires grappling directly with the terminological confusion that pervades the industry. The single most commercially important group of crustaceans in global seafood trade is the family Penaidae, the Penaeid prawns, which are true prawns belonging to the suborder Dendrobranchiata. Species such as the Pacific white shrimp Penaeus vanamai, also known as Lithopenaeus vanamai in older literature, with the classification currently accepted by most authorities reverting to Penaeus, and the giant tiger prawn Penaeus monodon dominate global aquaculture production, particularly across Asia and Latin America. Penaeus vanamei alone accounts for the majority of global farmed crustacean production, making it one of the most farmed animals on Earth by total weight. The global shrimp and prawn industry is worth over $50 billion annually and involves the production of millions of metric tons of product per year. The majority of this production comes from aquaculture, particularly the intensive pond farming systems developed in countries such as China, India, Thailand, Vietnam, Ecuador, and Indonesia, rather than from wild capture fisheries, though wild capture remains significant in some regions. In terms of culinary use, the distinction between prawns and shrimp has almost no practical significance. Both are nutritionally similar, high in protein, low in fat, rich in iodine and selenium, and both respond similarly to heat during cooking, becoming firm and opaque as their proteins denature. The flavor differences between different species of prawns and shrimp are far more significant for culinary purposes than any biological difference between the two groups. A wild-caught Gulf of Mexico brown shrimp tastes distinctly different from a farmed Pacific white shrimp, and both taste different from a large freshwater giant river prawn such as Macrobrachium rosenbergii, which, despite being a true prawn by some classifications, is one of the notable freshwater exceptions within the broader prawn and shrimp world, regardless of which biological suborder any of them belongs to. The conservation status of wild prawn and shrimp populations worldwide reflects the enormous commercial pressure that the global seafood industry places on these animals and their ecosystems. Wild Penaeid prawn populations in many parts of the world have been severely depleted by decades of intensive trawl fishing, a method of fishing that involves dragging large nets along the seafloor and which is associated with high levels of bycatch, the incidental capture of non-target species including sea turtles, juvenile fish, and other crustaceans. the environmental impact of shrimp trawling has been one of the most significant and controversial issues in marine conservation, and regulatory restrictions on trawling have been implemented in many jurisdictions in response to documented ecological damage. The rapid expansion of prawn and shrimp aquaculture, while reducing pressure on some wild populations, has created its own set of environmental challenges. The conversion of coastal mangrove forests to aquaculture ponds has been particularly destructive in Southeast Asia and Latin America, destroying critical nursery habitat for fish and other marine species and releasing large quantities of stored carbon into the atmosphere. Improved aquaculture practices, including inland pond systems, better waste management, and mangrove restoration programs, are beginning to address some of these issues, but the environmental footprint of global prawn and shrimp production remains a significant concern. The story of prawns and shrimp is therefore not just a story of biological diversity and culinary confusion. It is also a story of the relationship between human appetite, global trade, and the health of the world's coastal and marine ecosystems. So, what is the real difference between a prawn and a shrimp? At the biological level, prawns and shrimp belong to different suborders of the decapod crustaceans, Dendrobranchiata and Caridea respectively, and differ in their gill structure, their abdominal segment overlap pattern, their claw arrangement, and their reproductive biology. These are genuine, consistent, scientifically meaningful differences that have been recognized by marine biologists for over a century. At the everyday level, the words prawn and shrimp are used interchangeably in most of the English-speaking world, with no consistent relationship between the words and the underlying biology. What Americans call shrimp, Australians often call prawns. What is sold as a prawn cocktail in a British pub is almost certainly made from Caridea, true shrimp by the biological definition. At the culinary level, the distinction is essentially meaningless. Both taste delicious, both cook the same way, both are nutritionally comparable. The differences that matter in the kitchen, size, freshness, species, and how the animal was raised or caught, have nothing to do with whether the animal is technically a prawn or a shrimp. And at the ecological level, both prawns and shrimp represent a group of animals so commercially important, so ecologically significant, and so deeply embedded in human food culture that their story touches on some of the most pressing questions in marine conservation today. Questions about sustainable fishing, responsible aquaculture, and the future of the world's coastal ecosystems. The next time someone asks you the difference between a prawn and a shrimp, you now know more than almost anyone else at the table. Thank you for watching.